Black pastor vanished in 1977. 25 years later, a logger finds this under a tree stump. In the small southern town of Willow Creek, Pastor James Carter was more than just a man of faith, he was a beacon of hope. Everyone in the town knew him, whether they attended his church or not. He had a way of speaking that made people listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. His sermons were never just about religion, they were about life, about courage, about standing up for what was right. People respected him not because he demanded respect, but because he gave it to everyone. Children loved to sit near him during Sunday school, and elders often lingered after services just to talk to him. He remembered everyone's birthdays, visited the sick, helped struggling families, and was deeply involved in community programs. Pastor Carter's life was simple, yet full of purpose. He lived in a small, neat house on the edge of town with his wife, Evelyn, and their two children, Marcus and Lily. His mornings usually began before sunrise. He would sit quietly with a cup of coffee, reading his Bible and reflecting on the day ahead. After that, he would dress neatly in his favorite suit, greet his family with a warm smile, and head out to visit those in need. Whether it was helping a neighbor with groceries, counseling a troubled teenager, or attending a meeting about town improvements, Pastor Carter's day was always busy, but he moved with calm assurance, as if nothing could shake his sense of purpose. The town of Willow Creek had its share of challenges. Even though the civil rights movement had made significant progress by the late 1970s, racial tensions and unspoken prejudices still existed. Pastor Carter, being a black man in a position of influence, often had to navigate difficult situations. But he did so with dignity. He worked tirelessly to bring people together, often organizing community events that encouraged unity and understanding. His church became a safe place for everyone, a place where differences were respected, and compassion was a law that everyone followed. On the morning of May 14, 1977, Pastor Carter left his home like any other day. He kissed Evelyn on the cheek, told Marcus and Lily to behave at school, and promised he would return by evening. He mentioned a trip to a nearby town to attend a church meeting, and he seemed excited about it. As he walked out the door, he carried his briefcase and a small bag containing some personal items, including his Bible and notebook. Neighbors waved at him as he got into his car, and no one suspected that this would be the last time they would see him for many years. The morning passed uneventfully, and soon concern began to grow. Pastor Carter never failed to call home if he was going to be late, yet no phone call came that day. Evelyn waited anxiously, hoping he had simply been delayed. Hours turned into evening, and still, there was no sign of him. She tried to reach him on the phone, but the line was silent. The worry in her heart began to grow into fear. By nightfall, she knew something was terribly wrong. The next morning, Evelyn contacted the local police to report Pastor Carter missing. At first, the officers were hesitant. People sometimes disappeared for short periods, after all, and Pastor Carter had no known enemies. But as the day progressed, it became clear that this was no ordinary absence. His car was found abandoned on a country road, a few miles from the town, its doors unlocked and personal belongings still inside. There were no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints other than his own, and no indication of where he had gone. The scene was baffling. How could a man known and loved by everyone simply vanish? The town reacted with a mixture of shock and disbelief. News of Pastor Carter's disappearance spread quickly. Friends, neighbors, and church members gathered at his house, offering support to his family and hoping for some explanation. Flyers were printed, announcements were made at schools and local businesses, and the police began an official investigation. But the lack of evidence made the search difficult. There were no leads, no witnesses who had seen anything unusual, and the few strangers passing through the area were soon cleared of any connection. Rumors began to swirl. Some whispered that Pastor Carter had been targeted because of his work in the community, perhaps by someone who disagreed with his influence or his calls for justice. Others speculated that he might have had personal troubles that no one knew about. Yet his family and close friends rejected these ideas, they knew him too well. Pastor Carter was a man of integrity, a man who lived openly and honestly. The thought that he could willingly disappear without a word seemed impossible. The police conducted interviews, searched nearby forests and rivers, and even checked abandoned buildings, but nothing was found. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The town's hope began to fade, replaced by a quiet, painful acceptance that Pastor Carter might never be found. His family struggled to continue life without him. Evelyn tried to hold the household together, supporting Marcus and Lily while dealing with her own grief. The children missed their father deeply, often staring out the window, hoping to see him walk down the street as if nothing had happened. Despite the lack of progress, the community refused to forget him. Church services were held in his honor, and candles were lit every Sunday for the missing pastor. Local newspapers continued to cover the story sporadically, keeping the memory alive. People shared stories of Pastor Carter's kindness, reminding each other of the positive impact he had on their lives. Even strangers who had crossed paths with him spoke fondly, painting a picture of a man who genuinely cared for others. Meanwhile, investigators continued to explore every possible angle. Some looked into Pastor Carter's past, hoping to uncover secrets that might explain his disappearance. Others examined the surrounding towns and regions, questioning anyone who might have seen a suspicious person or event. Yet every lead ended in frustration. The trail was cold, and the mystery deepened. Over time, the case became one of those unsolved mysteries whispered about in the town, a story parents told their children, a cautionary tale about the fragility of life and the unknown dangers lurking in the world. Despite the sorrow, life in Willow Creek went on. Families continued to attend church, children grew up, and the seasons changed, but Pastor Carter's absence was a shadow that never left. His story became part of the town's history, a constant reminder of loss and the need for compassion. Friends who remembered him spoke of him with reverence, never allowing his memory to fade. The town learned to live with unanswered questions, cherishing the good he had done while wondering about the fate that had befallen him. Through it all, the spirit of Pastor Carter remained. He had touched so many lives that even his disappearance could not erase the kindness, courage, and faith he had instilled in the town. People who knew him continued to follow the lessons he had taught, to care for one another, to seek justice, and to remain hopeful even in the darkest times. The memory of Pastor Carter, missing but never forgotten, lingered in Willow Creek like a quiet prayer whispered among the trees, waiting for the day when the truth might finally come to light. After Pastor James Carter vanished, life in Willow Creek slowly settled into a painful rhythm. The town tried to continue, but his absence was a hole that could not be filled. The church he had led so passionately continued to hold services, but every pew seemed emptier without him. The congregation often whispered about the last sermon he gave, the stories he had shared, and the advice he had given to those in need. People remembered how he could sit with anyone, whether rich or poor, young or old, and make them feel seen and important. Even years later, no one could forget the warmth in his smile or the sincerity in his words. Evelyn Carter, his devoted wife, faced the hardest part of all. Each day, she woke up hoping for a miracle. She would make breakfast, help Marcus and Lily with their homework, and go about her daily chores, all the while thinking, maybe he will walk through the door today. But each day ended with disappointment. Despite her grief, Evelyn refused to give up. She believed that one day, somehow, her husband would be found. She spoke to the police often, checked hospitals and jails, and even visited other towns, hoping for a lead. Friends helped her as much as they could, but nothing seemed to bring any answers. Marcus, the elder child, struggled to understand the sudden absence of his father. He remembered mornings when his father would wake him gently, talk to him about school, and tell him to always do the right thing. Now, those mornings were silent. Lily, the younger sibling, would sometimes wander into the living room, staring at the door, expecting her father to appear. The children's grief was raw and constant. School counselors and teachers tried to help, but nothing could replace the presence of a loving father who had once been the heart of the family. The town of Willow Creek was close-knit, and everyone felt the loss. Pastor Carter had been a bridge between different parts of the community, helping people see past their differences. After he disappeared, some of that unity began to fade. Disagreements that he might have settled quickly lingered longer. Arguments over church leadership, local issues, and even personal matters became more common. Many elders lamented that the town seemed different, quieter, and somehow lonelier without him. Yet, at the same time, there was a quiet determination among the people to keep his memory alive. Church members organized charity events in his honor, community meals, and annual prayer vigils. They refused to let his disappearance be forgotten. Over the years, the media occasionally covered Pastor Carter's case, but interest quickly faded as news stories took over. Still, Evelyn kept the story alive. She reached out to local newspapers, wrote letters to television stations, and even appeared in interviews, hoping someone, somewhere, might remember something helpful. She never allowed herself to believe that Pastor Carter was gone for good. Her hope was both a comfort and a burden. She clung to the belief that one day, some clue, some miracle, would bring him home. Private investigators were also involved over the years. They examined his daily routines, interviewed people he had interacted with, and looked for any sign of foul play. They followed countless leads, from strangers passing through town to distant relatives who might have known something. Sometimes, they would get excited by a promising tip, a person claiming to have seen Pastor Carter in a nearby town, or a car resembling his, but every lead ended in disappointment. Despite the frustration, Evelyn never gave up. Each failed lead was painful, but she believed that persistence would eventually uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the social context of the town was shifting. Willow Creek, like many southern towns, was slowly changing. The late 1970s and 1980s were a period of transformation. Racial tensions, though less overt than before, still lingered. Many residents remembered the civil rights struggles of the previous decade, and some were resistant to change. Pastor Carter had been a quiet but powerful force in promoting equality, fairness, and understanding among all people. His disappearance left a vacuum. Without his steady hand and moral guidance, old prejudices sometimes surfaced. People who had relied on him for counsel struggled to navigate difficult conversations without his wisdom. Despite this, there were moments of hope. Young people in the town who had grown up attending his church continued to follow his teachings. They organized community service projects, helped struggling neighbors, and tried to emulate the kindness they had learned from him. In this way, Pastor Carter's influence persisted, even in his absence. His sermons, saved in handwritten notes and shared among friends, became a source of guidance and inspiration. Families who had once been helped by him spoke of him at gatherings, ensuring that new generations would hear about the man who had devoted his life to helping others. Yet, as the years passed, the emotional toll on the family was undeniable. Evelyn aged faster than she should have, burdened by grief and uncertainty. Marcus and Lily grew into adults, but a quiet sadness followed them, a sense that their father's presence had been stolen from them. Holidays and birthdays were bittersweet, marked by memories of past celebrations and the painful absence of the man who had always been the center of their lives. Despite this, they clung to one another, finding strength in family bonds and in the memory of a father who had taught them integrity, courage, and faith. The investigation remained open, though progress was slow. Police files grew thicker with notes, interviews, and possible leads, but none provided definitive answers. Occasionally, new detectives would review the case, bringing fresh eyes and hope that technology or new investigative techniques might uncover something previously overlooked. For the town, the case became a symbol of perseverance and unresolved pain, a reminder that life could change in an instant, leaving questions that sometimes had no immediate answers. Community members, while continuing their own lives, often reflected on the mystery. Local historians wrote articles remembering Pastor Carter's work. People would gather at his favorite spots in town: the church, the park where he liked to walk, the small diner where he often had lunch, and speak of him in hushed tones. There was a shared understanding: he had touched lives deeply, and his absence was a wound that would not easily heal. Every conversation about him carried both sorrow and admiration. During this time, small but meaningful efforts kept his memory alive. Annual prayer services were organized, not only to hope for his return but to celebrate the life he had lived. Children who had known him as little ones told their children stories about the pastor who had helped them and their families. Evelyn often hosted gatherings at her home where neighbors and friends would come together to honor him, sharing memories, prayers, and sometimes tears. Through these actions, the town maintained a connection to the man who had once been the heartbeat of their community. Even decades later, the story of Pastor Carter's disappearance never fully left the collective memory of Willow Creek. While new families moved in and younger generations came of age, the tale of the kind, courageous pastor who had vanished without a trace remained. People would tell it to visitors or newcomers, a story that served as both a warning and an inspiration. It reminded everyone that life was fragile, that people could disappear under mysterious circumstances, and that the impact of a good person could continue long after they were gone. Though time passed, Evelyn and her children never stopped hoping. They continued to visit places Pastor Carter had loved, to speak of him in prayers, and to look for signs that he might still be out there somewhere. Even when the town seemed to have moved on, their dedication never wavered. Marcus and Lily, now adults, carried his lessons forward in their own lives. They volunteered in the community, supported neighbors in need, and kept his memory alive in the ways they lived and treated others. Through it all, the town of Willow Creek learned to live with the mystery. Pastor Carter's disappearance became a part of the town's history, a story of hope, loss, and perseverance. Even without answers, his influence endured. People were reminded daily of the importance of kindness, courage, and standing up for what was right. His absence, while painful, highlighted the depth of his impact: a man who could vanish without warning, yet whose life continued to shape the hearts of those he had touched. And so, the years passed, filled with unanswered questions, quiet sorrow, and enduring hope. The memory of Pastor Carter remained a guiding light for those who remembered him, a silent presence that continued to inspire and comfort. For his family, the community, and everyone whose life he had touched, he was gone but never forgotten. His disappearance left a void, yes, but it also left a legacy of faith, courage, and love that could never be erased. 25 years had passed since Pastor James Carter vanished from Willow Creek, yet his story never truly left the minds of those who remembered him. The town had changed over the decades: new families had moved in, businesses had come and gone, and the old landmarks were slowly being replaced, but the mystery of the missing pastor lingered like a shadow. For his family, hope was a fragile thing, maintained by memories, prayers, and the occasional glimmer of a lead that seemed promising but ultimately went cold. In the dense forests that surrounded Willow Creek, life carried on quietly, untouched by the passing years. Among the trees and rolling hills, a man named Tom Reynolds made his living as a logger. Tom was used to the rhythm of the forest, the smell of pine and earth, the sound of saws cutting through trunks, and the occasional rustle of wildlife. The forest had a way of making a man feel small yet connected to something much larger, and Tom had long found comfort in that balance. Each day, he and his crew would set out early, working tirelessly to clear designated plots of trees for timber, always mindful of the careful planning required to keep the land safe. On a crisp autumn morning, Tom arrived at a plot that had recently been cleared for logging. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows through the trees. As he walked through the area, inspecting the ground for hazards, he noticed a large tree stump that seemed different from the others. It had been cut down years ago, but the soil around it looked as though it had been disturbed more recently. Curiosity sparked in him, and he knelt to examine it more closely. Something about the shape of the stump, the uneven dirt around its base, made him pause. He reached down and moved a few loose leaves, revealing a small cavity beneath the roots. His heart quickened. At first, he thought it might be an old animal burrow or a discarded container. But as he cleared more of the soil, he realized it was a hollow space that could have once been used to hide something intentionally. He motioned for one of his crew members to bring a flashlight, and they began to carefully uncover the contents. The earth was damp, and the smell of decay was faint but unmistakable, sending a shiver down Tom's spine. He felt both fear and anticipation, knowing that whatever lay beneath the stump could be significant. After several minutes of careful digging, Tom and his crew revealed a small, rusted metal box, partially buried under the roots. Its surface was corroded, and dirt clung to the edges, but it was intact. Tom's hands trembled slightly as he lifted it from the ground. The box was small, roughly the size of a shoebox, and appeared to have been deliberately hidden. Inside, they found several items wrapped in old cloth. Among them was a watch, heavily tarnished but identifiable, a leather-bound Bible with initials etched into the cover J.C., and a small notebook filled with handwriting that, at first glance, seemed to belong to Pastor Carter. The discovery sent shockwaves through Tom. He realized he had found something extraordinary, evidence connected to the missing pastor who had vanished a quarter of a century earlier. His mind raced with possibilities. Had this been hidden here all these years? Was there more to be found in the surrounding forest? The questions were endless, but one thing was clear: this was a major breakthrough. Tom immediately contacted the local authorities. The police arrived quickly, their interest piqued by the loggers' discovery. For the first time in decades, the investigation into Pastor Carter's disappearance seemed alive again. Forensic experts were brought in to examine the items. They carefully documented the condition of the box and its contents, noting the age and wear. The watch had stopped at a particular time, perhaps the moment it had been hidden, while the Bible and notebook contained notes and observations that seemed personal and deeply reflective. The notebook proved particularly intriguing. Though the pages were yellowed and fragile, the writing was legible. It contained entries from days leading up to Pastor Carter's disappearance. Some notes were mundane reminders about church meetings, visits to parishioners, and daily prayers, but others hinted at tension and unease. There were references to people in town who had disagreed with him, brief mentions of threats that had been made, and cryptic notes about being careful where he went. Nothing explicitly described a plan or intention, but the entries suggested that Pastor Carter may have been aware of danger before he vanished. Word of the discovery spread quickly through Willow Creek. Neighbors, friends, and former congregants gathered near the logging site and police station, eager to see any sign that their missing pastor had left behind a clue. The town buzzed with speculation, hope, and a renewed sense of urgency. People who had long mourned began to feel that perhaps the truth was finally within reach. Local reporters arrived to cover the story, and the discovery dominated the headlines. After 25 years, Pastor Carter's story was once again alive in the hearts and minds of the community. The police, eager to act quickly, expanded their search in the forest surrounding the stump. They examined nearby areas for additional evidence, checking for disturbed soil, discarded personal items, or other signs of the past. The forest, quiet for so many years, now seemed full of secrets. Every fallen branch and hidden path was scrutinized, as if the trees themselves held memories of what had happened long ago. For the first time in decades, the case was moving forward with purpose, driven by a single, unexpected discovery. For Evelyn Carter, the news was overwhelming. She received a phone call early in the morning from a police officer, and for a moment, she could hardly breathe. When she learned of the discovery, a flood of emotions swept over her: relief, hope, fear, and sorrow, all at once. She rushed to the site, accompanied by Marcus and Lily, and stood silently as authorities showed her the items that had been found. The watch, the Bible, and the notebook were tangible links to a man who had been absent for a quarter of a century. Her hands trembled as she touched the worn leather of the Bible, tracing the familiar initials of her husband. The discovery also raised many questions. How had the box ended up under the stump? Was it a deliberate hiding place, or had it been moved there accidentally over the years? Could there be more evidence nearby? Investigators considered the possibility that the pastor had been targeted by someone, perhaps for reasons connected to his work or his influence in the community. Theories began to circulate, ranging from foul play to an accidental disappearance. Every clue seemed to open more doors than it closed. Despite the uncertainty, the discovery was a turning point. The town felt a renewed connection to Pastor Carter, as if he were no longer entirely lost. People gathered for prayer vigils at the site, expressing gratitude that something tangible had been found. The church organized special services in his honor, reading passages from his Bible and reflecting on the lessons he had shared during his life. For many, it was a moment of emotional release, a chance to grieve, to hope, and to remember the man who had touched so many lives. Tom Reynolds, the logger who had stumbled upon the hidden box, became a quiet hero in the story. He often visited the site to check on the progress of the investigation and to ensure that the area was treated with respect. Though he had simply been doing his job, his discovery had rekindled a connection between the past and the present, allowing the town and the family to take steps toward understanding what had happened. He felt a sense of pride and humility, knowing that a simple act of curiosity had changed the course of a long-standing mystery. As the investigation continued, the notebook became a central piece of evidence. Experts examined the handwriting, the paper, and the context of the entries. While no definitive answers emerged immediately, the contents suggested that Pastor Carter had been cautious in the days before his disappearance. He had written about meetings, encounters, and moments of unease, as though anticipating challenges or potential threats. The entries offered a glimpse into his mindset, revealing a man deeply committed to his work, aware of risks, yet unwilling to abandon his principles. For Willow Creek, the discovery marked a turning point in how the community viewed the past. What had been a cold, unresolved mystery was now a story of resilience, connection, and hope. Even after 25 years, the possibility of understanding what had happened to Pastor Carter had arrived. The forest, once silent and still, now seemed full of meaning, as if the hidden box had waited patiently for someone to uncover it. Though many questions remained, the discovery gave the town and the family a sense of purpose. They could finally take steps to uncover the truth, honor Pastor Carter's memory, and perhaps bring closure to a story that had haunted them for decades. For Evelyn, Marcus, Lily, and the people of Willow Creek, the hidden box under the tree stump was not just a collection of items, it was a bridge between the past and the present, a reminder that even in the darkest mysteries, hope could endure. And so, with the discovery of the hidden box, the search for answers entered a new chapter. The forest, the town, and the family held their breath, waiting for the story to unfold. Every detail mattered now, every clue was precious, and the hope that had never fully died began to burn more brightly than ever before. The journey to uncover the truth about Pastor James Carter, missing for 25 years, was only beginning, and the world seemed suddenly alive with possibilities once more. After the discovery of the hidden box under the old tree stump, the investigation into Pastor James Carter's disappearance took on new energy. The police, who had long struggled with dead ends and missing evidence, now had tangible items to study. The watch, the Bible, and the notebook were carefully examined, catalogued, and analyzed. Forensic experts were brought in to test the materials, determine their age, and look for clues that could reveal what had happened in the days leading up to Pastor Carter's disappearance. Every detail, from the handwriting in the notebook to the small scratches on the metal box, was scrutinized with great care. The notebook quickly became the centerpiece of the investigation. Its pages, though yellowed with age, were legible and contained both mundane notes and entries that hinted at unease. Pastor Carter had written about meetings with church members, plans for community events, and visits to families in need. But among these ordinary entries were mentions of people he found suspicious or situations that made him uncomfortable. He wrote in brief, sometimes cryptic sentences, noting encounters with individuals who seemed hostile or resentful. Some entries suggested that he felt watched or that he should be cautious, though he did not specify what might happen. Detectives and forensic experts began piecing together a timeline based on the notebook. They looked at the last entries, comparing them to known events in Pastor Carter's life. Friends and family were interviewed again, this time with a renewed focus. Old acquaintances who had been in town in 1977 were tracked down. Even neighbors who had been reluctant to talk previously were willing to share their memories in light of the new evidence. Each story, no matter how small, was analyzed for clues. Sometimes, the accounts seemed contradictory, and sometimes they fit together like pieces of a puzzle, gradually forming a clearer picture of the pastor's last days. Evelyn Carter, along with her children Marcus and Lily, were deeply involved in the process. Though the renewed attention was emotionally exhausting, it also brought a sense of purpose. For decades, they had waited without answers, and now there was the possibility of understanding what had really happened. They carefully studied the notebook themselves, tracing the lines and reading between the words. They felt a mixture of sadness and hope, the sadness of remembering the fear and uncertainty Pastor Carter must have felt, and hope that the truth could finally be uncovered. As investigators delved deeper, they began to consider multiple possibilities. One theory was that Pastor Carter had been the target of foul play. Though he had no known enemies, his leadership in the community and his efforts to promote equality may have angered certain individuals. In a town with a history of tension and prejudice, it was possible that someone had wanted to silence him. Another theory was that he might have been in danger due to his travels, as he often visited neighboring towns for church meetings and community events. The fact that the box was hidden under a tree stump suggested that someone had either tried to protect it or deliberately conceal evidence. The forensic analysis of the items added further insight. The watch, stopped at a particular hour, might indicate the approximate time when Pastor Carter was taken or when the box was hidden. The Bible, carefully preserved, included notes in the margins, possibly revealing his thoughts and feelings at the time. The notebook offered a combination of routine entries and subtle warnings. Each item told part of the story, but the full picture remained elusive. Experts noted that the careful preservation of the items suggested that someone, perhaps even Pastor Carter himself, had intended for them to be found someday. In the town of Willow Creek, the discovery reignited discussions among residents. People who had long mourned the pastor were suddenly talking again, sharing memories and theories. Some recalled moments when Pastor Carter had expressed concern about certain individuals or events. Others remembered his warnings to be cautious while traveling. The town, which had quietly tried to move on over the years, was now fully engaged in the search for answers. It felt as though a part of the past had returned, demanding attention and careful thought. Local historians and journalists also became involved, researching old records, newspaper articles, and public documents from 1977. They examined events leading up to the disappearance, including community meetings, protests, and social tensions that might have involved Pastor Carter. Their work added context to the investigation, helping to reconstruct the environment in which he had lived and worked. This historical perspective was invaluable, showing that his disappearance could not be viewed in isolation but rather as part of a larger story of the town and its struggles during that era. During this time, authorities also examined the possibility of locating any remains nearby. The forest where the stump was found had been searched before, but now, with precise information from the location of the box, investigators could focus on specific areas. Search teams carefully examined the surrounding soil, underbrush, and tree roots, looking for anything that could shed light on the events of 1977. The forest, once quiet and undisturbed, was now alive with activity, each step a search for closure and truth. The emotional impact on the family was profound. Evelyn, Marcus, and Lily often spent long hours at the police station or at home, reviewing evidence and discussing theories. Memories of the past mingled with the new investigation. Evelyn remembered the day Pastor Carter left for that fateful meeting, the quiet hope she had held each day, and the fear that had never truly left her. Marcus and Lily reflected on the lessons their father had taught them, and on how those lessons guided their search for understanding. For them, the investigation was not just about finding answers, it was about honoring his life and the principles he had lived by. As weeks passed, investigators began to identify patterns. Certain entries in the notebook seemed to correlate with known tensions in the town. Mentions of specific names, locations, or incidents helped authorities focus on areas and people that might have had a connection to the disappearance. While the investigation was careful not to jump to conclusions, the detective work was methodical, combining historical research, forensic analysis, and interviews to reconstruct the timeline. Every small discovery added to a growing sense that the truth was within reach. Community involvement also played a role. Neighbors who remembered Pastor Carter offered insights, shared old photographs, and recounted events that might have seemed insignificant at the time. Each contribution, no matter how minor, helped form a more complete picture. For the people of Willow Creek, the investigation became more than a case. It became a collective effort to remember, understand, and seek justice for a man who had given so much to the town. Throughout the investigation, new questions arose. Why had the box been hidden in the forest? Who might have had knowledge of its location? Were there others involved? Each answer seemed to lead to more questions, creating a complex web of possibilities. Yet, despite the uncertainty, the process brought a sense of progress that had been missing for decades. After 25 years, the story was no longer frozen in time. It was moving forward, slowly but steadily, guided by evidence, persistence, and the unwavering hope of those who had never given up. For the first time in a generation, the family and community felt that closure was possible. While the ultimate outcome was still unknown, the combination of tangible evidence, historical research, and forensic expertise offered a realistic chance of solving a mystery that had haunted Willow Creek for decades. Each day brought new insights, discussions, and discoveries, reinforcing the belief that the truth could be uncovered, no matter how long it had been hidden. Through it all, Pastor Carter's legacy remained central. His teachings, his dedication to justice, and his acts of kindness continued to inspire everyone involved. The investigation, while focused on uncovering the events of the past, also highlighted the ongoing influence of his life. People spoke of him with reverence, not only as a man who had disappeared but as someone who had lived with courage, integrity, and compassion. The memory of Pastor Carter shaped the investigation, reminding everyone that the pursuit of truth was also a way of honoring his life. As the investigation unfolded, the forest, the town, and the family were united in a shared effort. Each step forward, each clue examined, and each story recalled brought them closer to understanding what had happened. The hidden box under the tree stump had become a key to unlocking decades of mystery, and it had opened the door to answers that had long seemed impossible. For Willow Creek, the journey toward truth was finally underway, guided by hope, determination, and the enduring memory of a man who had never truly been forgotten. After decades of unanswered questions, the discovery of Pastor James Carter's belongings under the old tree stump had finally breathed new life into the investigation. For Evelyn Carter and her children, Marcus and Lily, it was a mixture of relief, fear, and hope. They had spent 25 years living with uncertainty, and now, the possibility of answers seemed within reach. The items found, the Bible, the watch, and the notebook, were more than objects. they were pieces of a puzzle that could finally reveal what had happened to the man who had been the heart of Willow Creek. Investigators focused on the clues provided in the notebook, the most important being the entries made in the weeks before Pastor Carter vanished. The writing suggested he had sensed danger, though he had never detailed what that danger might have been. Forensic experts examined the notebook carefully, comparing handwriting, paper, and ink with known samples to ensure authenticity. Every note, every small detail, was analyzed to determine the timeline of events. Slowly, a picture began to emerge of Pastor Carter's final days, a combination of routine work, concern for the community, and cautious awareness of unseen threats. The forensic team also explored the forest near the tree stump, searching for any other signs of the past. Over the course of several weeks, they uncovered small items that had likely been overlooked decades ago, a piece of fabric, old photographs, and minor personal belongings. Each item was carefully documented and sent for analysis. While none immediately solved the mystery, collectively they helped reconstruct the environment in which Pastor Carter had disappeared. The forest, once quiet and untouched, now held the echoes of history, silently offering its secrets to those patient enough to listen. Meanwhile, the town of Willow Creek became deeply involved. News of the renewed investigation spread quickly, drawing residents who had once known Pastor Carter to come forward with memories, photographs, and anecdotes. Many recalled incidents they had long forgotten, brief moments when Pastor Carter had seemed uneasy, warnings he had offered to others, or small conflicts he had quietly resolved. These recollections, when pieced together with the notebook and other evidence, began to clarify events that had seemed mysterious for decades. The town was no longer just observing the investigation, they were active participants in a process that felt both historical and profoundly personal. The combination of physical evidence and witness testimony eventually led authorities to a new area of focus. It appeared that Pastor Carter had been lured to a remote location by someone who may have felt threatened by his influence in the community. While investigators could not yet confirm the exact motives, the evidence suggested a deliberate act rather than an accident or voluntary disappearance. This discovery brought mixed emotions to the family: pain at the realization of what might have occurred, but also relief that the truth was becoming clearer. They had waited so long, and finally, their perseverance seemed justified. During this time, Evelyn Carter revisited the Bible and notebook frequently, tracing her husband's notes and reflecting on the courage he had shown. She realized that even in his final days, Pastor Carter had been guided by his principles. He had acted with integrity, had sought to protect his congregation, and had lived in a way that honored his faith and his community. For Marcus and Lily, these discoveries were both heartbreaking and inspiring. They recognized the depth of his commitment and the courage it must have taken to face challenges quietly while continuing to serve others. Eventually, forensic investigators were able to confirm that the items found in the forest were indeed Pastor Carter's. Small traces of biological material allowed them to identify approximate locations where he had been, offering further insight into the timeline of his disappearance. The watch, stopped at a particular hour, became a symbolic marker of the last known moment of his life. The notebook provided context and emotional depth, revealing his concern, vigilance, and devotion to his work. Taken together, these elements allowed authorities to reconstruct events with a level of detail that had previously seemed impossible. The town of Willow Creek began to hold memorial services, combining grief and gratitude. Residents gathered in the church where Pastor Carter had once preached, lighting candles and offering prayers. Stories of his life, his work, and his unwavering kindness were shared publicly for the first time in decades. For many, it was a cathartic experience, a way to honor a man whose influence had endured even in his absence. Families who had benefited from his guidance came forward, recounting personal experiences that highlighted his lasting impact. It was clear that Pastor Carter's legacy was far greater than anyone had realized. As investigators continued to uncover details, they identified individuals who may have had knowledge of events surrounding Pastor Carter's disappearance. Interviews, combined with historical records and new evidence, allowed authorities to piece together a plausible narrative. While not all questions could be answered definitively, the combination of items, witness accounts, and historical context provided enough information to understand the circumstances of his disappearance. It became clear that Pastor Carter had been targeted for reasons linked to his work in the community and his influence as a leader. For Evelyn, Marcus, and Lily, the resolution was bittersweet. While they had finally obtained answers, the reality of the events was painful. Yet, through this journey, they also discovered the enduring strength of family, community, and faith. They had maintained hope when others might have given up, and that persistence had paid off. The town, too, experienced a renewed sense of unity, coming together to honor Pastor Carter and to reflect on the lessons his life had taught them. His story became both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration, reminding everyone that courage, integrity, and kindness could endure even in the face of tragedy. In the months following the investigation, Willow Creek worked to preserve the memory of Pastor Carter. A memorial was established near the church, with a plaque recounting his life, his work, and the circumstances of his disappearance. The community created scholarships in his name for children pursuing education in social service, theology, or community leadership. These efforts ensured that future generations would understand the profound impact of his life and the lessons he had imparted. His story became woven into the fabric of the town, serving as a reminder that one person's dedication could resonate far beyond their immediate surroundings. Evelyn, Marcus, and Lily found comfort in knowing that their father's life was honored and remembered. While the grief of losing him never fully disappeared, the knowledge that the truth had been revealed allowed them to begin healing. They continued to visit the forest where the box had been found, not searching for more evidence, but to feel close to him and to reflect on his enduring influence. Through this process, they recognized that his spirit lived on not just in the items that had been discovered, but in the lives of the people he had touched and the community he had served. The town, too, benefited from this resolution. The story of Pastor Carter became a symbol of perseverance and hope. Residents who had once felt powerless in the face of tragedy found inspiration in the way the investigation had unfolded. They learned that even the longest mysteries could be solved with patience, determination, and collective effort. The church, once overshadowed by grief, became a place of renewed purpose, hosting events that honored the past while building a stronger, more united future. In the end, Pastor James Carter's disappearance, discovery, and the eventual unraveling of the mystery served as a powerful lesson. It reminded everyone that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, could be uncovered with persistence and faith. His life, his work, and the love he had shared with the community endured far beyond his years. Even in absence, he continued to guide, teach, and inspire, proving that the influence of one person could ripple through time, leaving a lasting mark on the hearts of those left behind. Though the sorrow of his loss remained, it was now accompanied by understanding, closure, and appreciation. Willow Creek had finally reconciled with the mystery that had haunted it for a generation. Pastor Carter's legacy, his courage, compassion, and dedication remained alive, a light that would continue to shine for years to come. The community learned that even in tragedy, hope could be found, and that remembering, honoring, and seeking justice were acts of love that could transcend decades. Through this journey, Evelyn, Marcus, Lily, and the people of Willow Creek discovered that the story of Pastor James Carter was not just about disappearance and discovery, it was about the enduring power of memory, the resilience of the human spirit, and the profound impact that one life, lived with integrity and kindness, could have on an entire community. And with that understanding, they finally found peace, carrying forward the lessons of a man who had never truly been gone, whose life and legacy would continue to inspire, guide, and heal.